Adam Rittenberg is with us now. You see him on Twitter at ESPN Rittenberg, where he talks a lot of college football for ESPN. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. What is up, Adam? How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Thanks a lot. I want to start before we dig into some of the stuff you've written to kind of go back just a little bit. When the announcement came out last week that the college football playoff was going to stick with the 4-team model, the 4-entry model, all the way through the remainder of this television schedule, where do you think the Big Ten, you spend a lot of time near that conference, where do you think they fall on the spectrum of what they want out of a college football playoff?
Right. So I think the Big Ten does want an expanded playoff, starting with the commissioner, Kevin Warren. I think what was, maybe the holdup on the Big Ten's end was that they didn't feel like all the other key issues were necessarily ironed out. As far as revenue distribution, there was a lot of talk about automatic qualifiers, that the Big Ten wants that. I don't know how firm that position is and whether that's the main thing that they want. It sounds like there's other areas that they just felt were not completely sorted out to the point where they could go forward with a approval for this particular expansion plan. But the thing that's important to remember is that every league is in a slightly different position, especially regarding its own situation, with media rights. So the Big Ten is going to be the next league up to renegotiate its media rights deal, and I think after that point, I'm not saying that its position on the playoff will be different, but there'll be fewer unanswered questions about revenue and what its partners are most interested in for the Big Ten championship game, and maybe for divisions, if there are even going to be divisions in the Big Ten going forward. And so I think there was a sense, not just with Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren being relatively new, but some of the other new commissioners, that even though it's painful not to expand now, starting with a fresh model after this contract and maybe bidding it out to multiple television partners would better serve everybody in the long term. And it's not what the fans want to hear at the moment, but I think the Big Ten's more in that sort of mindset with CFP expansion.
So you touched on this at the end. I was about to ask you this. Assuming in that new media rights deal, Fox still has as big a cut of the Big Ten as they currently do, a 12-team playoff entirely on your employer, ESPN, probably is not something the Big Ten has an appetite for.
Probably not. I haven't. Kevin hasn't told me that specifically, but you can connect the dots.
Sure.
And you look at the Pac-12, also a league that's very much invested with Fox, and not just Fox, right? I mean, CBS is going to need to do some college football programming, probably. NBC has the Notre Dame package, but they seem to want to get more involved in college football, given the recent reports about the Big Ten. And so, there's all sorts of ways that they could go forward with the next media agreement for the CFP. Obviously, I work for ESPN. I'd love for it to be on ESPN, but I think that's less and less realistic, to be honest, given what we've heard out of some of the commissioners that are maybe less tied in with their own media package with ESPN.
You did a piece on ESPN.com just a couple of days ago, the behind-the-scenes battle over Oregon's football future and why Dan Lanning won. And you point out immediately this is the second time in 4 years they were looking for a new coach when they hired Lanning. We understand why Cristobal leaves to go to Miami. They ponied up. They gave him a lot of money. He was going back home. But I always viewed Oregon as a top 20 job. And, I've never been out to Eugene. Is the job maybe overrated to some degree?
Well, one thing I did hear, we didn't get into this so much in the piece, but sources told me that, when they fired Mark Helfrich and ended up hiring Willie Taggart, they didn't have as much interest as you would have thought in the job. And even this time around, there was the Justin Wilcox flirtation, but it wasn't like you were hearing, established head coaches were just lining up to get this job. So I think there's some concerns about the Oregon job, even though it's been a very successful program under multiple coaches for quite some time, and they've played for a couple of national titles, and they've been the preeminent program in the Pac-12 here the last few years. So I think there is a bit of hesitancy around the job, but it's also a place that for decades operated very much from a promote from within, insular type mindset where coach would move on or retire in Mike Belotti's case, and they would just promote from within and keep it within the family. And so I think there was a sense that after Willie Taggart leaves after only 1 year to go to Florida State, and then Mario leaves after a few more years to go to Miami, do we want to keep bringing in these outside guys that may not see this job as a destination, or do we want to bring in one of our own, like a Justin Wilcox, who would see this as a destination and never want to leave, but would maybe operate a little bit differently than they had certainly under Cristobal, who had taken Oregon's recruiting to unprecedented heights. They hadn't quite won on the field like they did under Helfrich and Chip Kelly, but the recruiting was at a place that it had never been before at Oregon.
Obviously, there's a passion for college football in the South, and the SEC has the logo. It just means more. Was there any frustration with Mario when he was out there on just the Pac-12 or Oregon, or the Oregon fans and their passion, commitment to an everyday grind of sort of an SEC-style recruiting out there? And do you think Dan Lanning will experience the same thing? Do they love it as much in Eugene as they do in Auburn?
Well, I do think they love it. I never got the sense from talking to people around Mario that he was leaving because of a lack of passion or a lack of commitment. I mean, they gave him what he needed there. I mean, Rob Mullins, the athletic director, says in the story, we completely overhauled the way that we recruit because of how Mario wanted to do it, and we're not going back. We're continuing down that path with Dan Lanning, who's coming in from Georgia with a kind of a similar recruiting approach, the SEC style recruiting. And so I don't think that was a factor at all, nor was it a deterrent for a guy like Dan Lanning. I mean, do they care as much as they do in the South? Probably not, but they care an awful lot. I mean, it's a great place to see a game. It's not a place that has been great in football for 50 years. They've been great in football for 15, 20 years. But it's a passionate fan base, and they have some unique parts about it in that the connection with Nike, the facilities, the backing of Phil Knight. I mean, there's a lot of SEC programs that wish they had a Phil Knight, and Oregon has one. So there's definitely some unique advantages there, even though maybe the overall interest in football is not comparable to the Southeast.
Adam Rittenberg is our guest at ESPN Rittenberg. He joins us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. See him on ESPN, read him at ESPN.com. The other side of that transaction, you talked about Mario Cristobal. He is at Miami now and has hired a really good staff. I mean, it's names we all recognize, right? And by all indications, he's hit a home run with his staff. I don't, I hate, we do absolutes on this show. You're silly to do them. But you would almost have to say the absolute here, Adam, is if Miami can't get back in championship discussions now, the ship may have sailed permanently. With the type of money they've spent, with the quality staff they've hired, if they can't do it with this staff, you do start to have to ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, they got the guy that they wanted. Money was always a bit of a drawback at Miami, and maybe a reason why they've gone through this period of 20 years without being a nationally elite program when others were investing much more in their facilities and in their coaching staff. And so, they now have gone all in on a head coach and provided him with the resources to go out and land, notable coordinators, Kevin Steele and Josh Gaddis, and assistant coaches like Charlie Strong. And they're still in a very, very winnable conference. And so you're right. If it doesn't work with this group, given the investment that Miami's really never made before, we'll see if that ultimately turns into an on-campus stadium or other facilities that they can use on their campus. You got to wonder if it's going to happen there. And I do think they'll have success. I don't know if they're going to dominate the ACC every year or win the national championship, but I think Mario Cristobal, because of the way he recruits and because of his connection to Miami, gives them the best chance possible to make that leap. So it'll be a very interesting place to watch here the next few years.
Earlier on the show, we were talking about an SEC coaches poll, and they did the most overrated coaches, and number 2 on that list was Brian Kelly at LSU. He's yet to coach a game. We all disagreed with that. I don't know. Where are you right now on Brian Kelly to LSU?
Oh, I mean, again, I think there's a lot of things you can say about Brian Kelly. Overrated is not one of them. I mean, name me a Notre Dame coach that has done more than he has done since Lou Holtz, who won the national title in '88. It's not even close. I mean, since 2017, Notre Dame's been a consistent 10-win program. They've made a couple of college football playoff appearances. They haven't done well in the major bowls. That would maybe be the only thing that you could knock against Brian Kelly. But and then I think the other question I have is just the recruiting approach. And he certainly welcomed the the dancing and the videos and maybe doing things he wasn't doing at Notre Dame. But that was always the knock on him, was really good CEO, really good offensive mind, but was not, we were talking about Mario Cristobal, not that same mentality, not wired like Mario and many of the SEC coaches, Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, Ed Orgeron, his predecessor. Is he wired that same way in recruiting? So that's my big question. But overrated is not the right word for Brian Kelly. He did a heck of a job at Notre Dame. And, he'll have an interesting legacy there because he left the way he did. But it's very hard to win as long as he did and as consistently as he did, especially after that big step back that they had in 2016 to rebound the way that program did under Brian Kelly.
It was obviously, Adam, before you get out of here, a tough 10 days for Bryan Harsin when all that was going on, but he had to finish his coaching staff. Well, what did you think of what he did with his coaching staff from the outside looking in? And where is Bryan Harsin, in your opinion, going into the 2022 season? I know you occasionally dabble in hot seats, and everybody does. Where do you think Bryan Harsin is?
Well, he's right up at the top, obviously. I mean, he's got to deliver, and I don't even know what it is that Auburn fans are looking for him to be safe going into 2023. He's going to have to, win big games and show tangible progress, especially on the offensive side. I do think what's interesting with the staff, this is probably the staff he wanted all along. I think, there's different ways that staffs get put together and, agents get involved and there's pressure within the school. Well, you got to get guys in here who are SEC guys. And I think Mike Bobo and Derek Mason are both really good coaches. But I think these two coordinators, Jeff Schmedding and Eric Kiesau, these are the guys who are with him at Boise. These are the guys who understand how he likes to run his program and understand what he wants from a schematic standpoint. And they both have coordinator experience. So not to say that that's automatically going to make them better, but I think if Bryan Harsin's going to go down, at least he's going to go down with his guys doing it his way. There's always going to be this question, as you guys know, is he SEC enough? Is he a good enough fit at Auburn? And the only way we're going to find out is the results on the field. But he's obviously got to deliver this year, or probably he's out. Not still getting his money, but he's got to produce this season for Auburn.
And while we were talking to Adam, Auburn announced the hiring of their final staff member, Ike Hilliard, a name a lot of SEC fans will recognize. The former Florida wide receiver will be Auburn's receivers coach, just announced by Auburn. Has been in the NFL for quite a while, 11 years now, most recently with the Steelers. So that caps off Bryan Harsin's hiring for his staff there at Auburn. At ESPN Rittenberg is where you follow Adam. Read him at ESPN.com. See him on ESPN. Adam, thank you so much for the time. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, enjoy it, guys. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Adam with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.